If you have a model that you need to create an exploded view of, this is the basic process. Now, as I said before, this model that I'm using here is obviously not what you're making, but the principles are exactly the same, okay? What you need to do first of all is go to File, New, and within there you will find at the bottom that you have these options here for presentation files, okay? We want the millimeters one. And when you've opened that, it will be expecting you to insert a file. So in our case, we want to insert that other file that I just used, which is, I think, this one here. So that would be your assembly that you already saved, yeah? Happy with that? Now, what we have is this together currently, so we need to basically explode it. Now, it's a bit kind of awkward on the screen because it's quite a small screen. I'll maybe just get rid of that for now. But up at the top, really, there's only one thing you need to do, or one tool that you need to use, and that's the Tweak Components button up at the top. If we click that, it allows us to grab individual components and just move them apart, and we can choose to do it on like our triad of directions or X, Y, Z axes. So if I do that, the thing that you need to start by considering is which component is at the core, like what's the bit that's not moving and what are the bits that are being pulled apart. Does that make sense? So if you've done an assembly, that will usually be whatever component was grounded, like the thing that everything else kind of hangs off. So in this case, that's going to be that part there. So I'm not going to move that. I'm just going to move these other three parts that are affixed to it. Now, when we actually finish, we'll change it to the isometric view, or we can do it now. It doesn't really matter. So if I go to Tweak Components, I can click on a component, and then can you see how it's given me these different directional arrows that I can use to drag it? So I can pull that out this way, and you'll see that it allows me to specify a distance if I want to. That can be useful where, for example, you have on the speaker face, you've got the two different parts. You would probably want them both to be out exactly the same amount. So that would allow you to regularize the distances that you're moving things apart so that they're all consistent. The other thing that you can do though, and this wouldn't apply to this particular example, is that you can move multiple items. So in the case of your task where you've got the two speaker bezels, rather than moving them one at a time, if you click and hold, Shift, Control not Shift, you can click on several items at a time, and then when we tweak the components, you'll see it moves all of them. Okay? Now you wouldn't do that for this because of the way that these are attached. That top part has to be exploded upwards because that's how it would fit together, and these bits here would be exploded to the sides. But you just have to think about your model, which way round or which direction would the parts explode in, and you may find, just as an additional piece of advice, if you have a complex thing that, for example, you've got your base item and then there's like 6 different things that need to be stepped out, all spaced out from each other, sometimes it's easier to select all of the things that need to be removed from your base, move them out a certain amount, and then with the exception of whatever's staying at that position, select the rest, move them out, with the exception of the part that's staying there, move the rest out so that you're moving them all in like a chunk. And each time you move out, you're dropping one of the items. Because if you try and say you've got to space 6 things out, you have to ensure there's enough space between each item and the last item that they're not overlapping, yeah? And so if you just try and guess that, you'll quite often find it really difficult, you know, and you end up having to keep going back and forth and nudging them about. Whereas if you just drag everything out and then drop one item, drag everything out a wee bit more, drop another item and so on, you'll kind of space them all out. So anyway, Tweak Components, click your item, drag it, basically until there's clear space between it and the next item. You can specify a distance if you want, you don't have to. Same again, so over here we'd want to drag that out so that it's not overlapping. And then again at the top, Tweak Components, we click on this item, and this time we're dragging it vertically. And for that item, that's it basically done. Key thing to remember though, if it's an exploded isometric, when you open that presentation file in your drawing, it has to be orientated as an isometric. So if you have used the view cube and you've orientated it round at some weird angle, that's how it will look when you open it in your drawing. You follow? So it's important before you save that and move on that you use the top corner of the view cube, which will give you an isometric angular view, and you get it whichever way round you want it to be, because obviously you can change that to that, you know, that way round or that way round or whatever, you know. So whatever way round you feel you need to have it, get it there. Save it. So just call it assembly 2 exploded. Click OK. And then when you go and create a new drawing, or you're on a drawing sheet you've already got, you would just go to base view, and hopefully we've got that IPN file there. Yeah, we see it there. But it's kind of a bit weird. It's not looking quite the way I wanted it to. So if we just go up to the view cube here, we should be able to orientate it the right way. Okay, I think it kind of that lag when I moved it a wee minute ago. And then you'd set it up so if it's meant to be, for example, I mean, generally it wouldn't be hidden detail, but you know, it'll tell you in the instructions. So we'd want it to be a hidden line removed. Maybe add a label. And then if we just tick the wee light bulb beside the label will come up with it. And we can grab that label and put it below. Now, one last thing. In the British Standards, Mark, one of the things that you got as an option was part numbers. Do you remember when I mentioned that? This is where part numbers can come in, because you can create, in Annotate, you can create a kind of a parts list. So we select the view that we want a parts list from, and we'll just say OK to start with. Place that there. So that's all of the items. And you can see it says the item number, 1, 2, 3, and the quantity. And what we then would need to do is add balloons. See these balloons? So this would be, if we click on it, part 2. So you click once, then right click to continue. Part 3. Part 1. Does that make sense? You know how I always say, make sure you name your files what the component should be called. That's because when you create a parts list, it derives the name of the part in the parts list from the file name. So if you've called it part 1, that's what its name will be there. But if you've just mashed your keyboard and called it, that's what will come up there too. Okay, that's why you should always name them. Now that table, this isn't really that important for you, but in that table, you can actually go in there and you can edit it by just double clicking on it. So you can choose what you want to be in the table. So you can choose, for example, which columns to have. That's the column chooser. And I don't want that description one, so I'm going to remove it. And now my table is just a nice simple parts list with the item, the quantity, and the part name or number. Okay? So that's you basically done your isometric view. That should, I mean, with me explaining it, it took longer, but that would realistically take you 5 minutes after you've done your actual assembly. So you get your assembly done, that's easy marks. Just remember to make sure you save it though, obviously. Okay.